Imagine you've been sharing your most painful memories with a woman you consider your therapist since childhood. Years of conversations. Years in which you believe she was the one person who truly helps and wants to help. But one day you find out she is not who she claimed to be all these years. Hello, everyone. Today we have disturbing stories from the Let's Not Meet subreddit. This is the 4th episode. Enjoy listening.
For some context, I had a really shitty childhood. It was terrible, where I don't remember anything from birth all the way to 13 years of age. Everything I know about what happened through those years was from a mixture of sparse memories, things my family have told me about myself, and police reports. One of those things I do remember, however, is this lady I called Auntie. No first name, no last name, nothing else contributing to her identity. She was just Auntie. I started seeing her when I was 7 years old, sitting in her living room as she typed everything I set down on her laptop. I had no problem with her. I saw her once every month, and she seemed gentle enough that I really thought that she was someone I could trust, so I did. 7 years later, 14 years old, I admitted to her that I tried to kill myself numerous times. It was a mixture of multiple different factors. My mother's increasing toxicity, the lack of social interaction at the time, and more importantly, I never moved on from the horrors of my childhood. Now, I was 14 years old at the time, and I was able to wonder why these meetings with Auntie never actually seemed to help me, especially to do with the fact that I begged her to tell me why I constantly wanted to die. I remember on the way to Auntie's house, I asked my mother if I would ever get the chance to see a different person, maybe get a different sort of help that Auntie clearly couldn't give. I was just hissed at to be quiet. Around that time, the relationship between me and my mother began to crack. My mother became a source of grief to me, and I cried about it during multiple sessions with my auntie. Auntie, at the end of these sessions, would try to defend my mother, or make me seem like I'm blowing things out of proportion. I tried to come up with my own reasons at the time on why she was not trying to understand things wholly, and I chalked it up to her being empathetic. Maybe being able to explain why mother was terrible was supposed to help me embrace it in some weird way. And then more things like that seemed to happen. I admit that when I was 16 years old, I was a terrible kid. I went to parties, drank whatever was served, and definitely did not tell anyone what I was doing. But then Auntie started to ask very specific questions, especially to the topics mentioned above. I was in shock. Again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt and thought that her sudden pinpointing of these things must be from the fact that at this point, she's known me for almost a decade. All the way into a year later, she started to bring up the parties I've gone to in these sessions without even bothering to hide behind questions. The relationship between me and my mother had almost been completely severed, and the worst part of all, something that still affects me till this day. At the end of each session, Auntie had started to invite me into the room and tell her every single thing I said. It was terrible hearing my own words against my mother, explaining the increasing abuse that she has begun to put me through, said straight to her face as she sat next to me. My grades in school began to drop. My mother forbade me from going out, and I was completely isolated. So I tried to kill myself on my 17th birthday. I ran into my mother's room looking for something that I could overdose with, or just something that could push me to the edge. I remember rummaging through everything until I went into her walk-in closet. I had barely gone into her room. In fact, I completely forgot about the fact that she even had one of these. In my crazed state, I just remember running into her closet and looking through every crevice. I stumbled upon a suitcase leaning against the wall under the hung-up clothes. If I close my eyes, I can still imagine it. It didn't look old, so that was probably what made me decide to open it up. When I did, all I saw was a ton of papers. The surprise of seeing so much snapped me out of the state I was in, and I recall sitting cross-legged on the floor and wondering what these papers were. After a while of reading, I realized that these were transcripts of Auntie and I sessions, literally dating all the way back to some of the first sessions that I did. I remember feeling sick, feeling so sick. I at least had enough sense to steal a few of the earlier papers to make it less noticeable. Reading through those transcripts just filled me up with more and more bitter questions, and I decided that night that I would kill myself after what I figured out what was going on. I was on a time crunch, feeling stressed because I really only had a year left to figure out what was going on before. I was faced with the looming threat of being kicked out as soon as I turned 18. I started to pay way more attention in our sessions, looking around her house whenever I got the chance to, looking for some indicators that could tell me who this psychologist really was. I started asking my mother more and more questions about Auntie, as she kept deflecting, repeating the same fact. She was a psychologist. That's until I did something that literally almost ruined the rest of my life. I decided to steal my mother's phone. It seems like a small thing now, but then it was really life or death. My mother was in the shower, and I had already packed all the stuff I needed to be out for a few hours, maybe even for a few nights somewhere. As soon as I heard the door lock, I swiped my mother's phone and bolted out the house. I didn't even look down at the thing until I was on the bus. I remember looking through my mother's messages first, and I knew I found Auntie when I stumbled across an unfamiliar name. Even better when the messages clearly showed when my mother booked appointments. I scrolled up for a while, enough for the bus to get me to a safe place. But even as I walked off the bus and years of texts were read, nothing incriminating had shown itself. I then looked through my mother's call logs, and I saw the fact that they call extremely often. I wasn't an idiot. Whatever was really going on was happening on calls instead of messages, which was smart. I'll give credit where credit is due, but it still didn't get me anything. Credit where credit is due, but it still didn't get me anything. I found a place to sit at on the side of the road, and I continued my search. I looked through my mother's social media, and when I tried searching up Auntie's name, nothing came up. I genuinely felt all hope leave me body then, and sometimes now I swear I can still feel the same sick feeling as I felt then. I almost gave up, almost. Every day I thank myself for mindlessly swiping through my mother's followers because I found her. Her account name didn't have her real name, some weird fake one, but when I clicked on her profile, it was most definitely her. She posted photos with some of my mother's friends, and I scrolled for a while down her page until I saw a photo that I posted of herself and my mother. Years ago. They have literally been friends even before I was born. I felt sick, betrayed, and a bit relieved that I now knew what was going on. Why my mother had transcripts. Why Auntie didn't think twice before telling my mother every single thing I said. Why she defended her. I didn't even bother to find a place to stay that night. I just went back home. I got beat black and blue for doing something that didn't deserve any forgiveness. It didn't hurt at all compared to what I found out earlier that day. All I asked my mother that night is, who is Auntie really? And she couldn't even answer that. A few years later, I was in my first year of university. I had the lucky chance to move out of my mother's house as soon as I got the chance to, with an old friend taking pity on me and allowing me to stay with him since we applied to the same university. He's one of my best friends now. What finally gave me closure in some bittersweet way. Clearing out my Instagram. I deleted people that I didn't care about or didn't know. My heart dropped when I saw a familiar username in my followers. I didn't think about it at all when I searched up the username in the search bar, and when it came up with Auntie's Facebook account, the psycho had been following me for God knows how long on my Instagram, and suddenly everything that didn't click finally made sense. The sudden, precise questions, why my mother suddenly decided to isolate me from my friends. It didn't even say psychologist or anything of the sort in her bio. Tell me why it said chemistry teacher with over 20 years, FML. I admit that I cried like a baby that night because it had taken years for me to finally understand why two of my main female models seemed to despise me. Still to this day, I mourn the fact that most of my early adult years are being used to heal from everything in my childhood, instead of going out with newly made friends and giving my all to university. It sucks. Everyone who hears my life story agrees on the fact that there's something wrong with them. I just wished I knew that sooner. 2 days ago, I had my first session with a real psychologist. Trust me, I did my research. I felt almost ashamed when I blurted out the reason why I'm sitting in this guy's chair. But he just smiled and told me we had a lot of work to do. Yeah, we do. I decided to post about my experience just in the slight chance anyone had a similar experience with therapy becoming up, or they feel like they've been living in a hole their entire life. I promise you guys, it gets better, with a little luck and surrounding yourself with the right people at least. Anyway, Auntie, let's not meet again.
Back when I was 14 years old, my family had moved from our home in England to the Republic of Ireland, where we lived for a further 6 years. We had first moved to the northwest of the country, but after a year of living there, we then relocated to the Irish Midlands, as my dad had gotten a new job working in Dublin. My parents had bought a cottage on the outskirts of a very small village that was a stopping point from one of the larger towns to the next. This village was so small and remote, there was basically nothing to do. But not long after moving here and taking to exploring the surrounding area with my border collie, Maisie, I eventually found a large stretch of bogland containing a man-made forest. Every weekend or half-term away from school, I took to walk in this area with my dog, in which I would follow along a railway line used for transporting peat. However, after months of trekking this very same bogland, I eventually stopped going there. I can't quite recall the reason why, but maybe it was because I always felt as though I was trespassing, which I wasn't, or because the bogland was so bumpy and uneven, I always came home with horrific blisters. Although I stopped going to this bogland to walk my dog, outside one of the nearby towns where I went to school, there was a public forest. Because this forest was a 20-minute drive away, my dad would take me and Maisie there, drop us off, and then pick us up again 2 or 3 hours later. What I loved about these woods was that it was always quiet, only with the occasional family, dog walker, or jogger passing us by. On one particular evening, I had gone back to these woods with Maisie, where my dad would later pick us up after running some errands. Making our way along the trail, the evening had already started to dimmer. Wanting to make my way back to the car park before it got too dark, I decided to take a shortcut through the forest via one of the many narrow side trails. Following down one of these side trails, me and Maisie stumbled upon a small tippy-shaped hut made from logs. Loving a good game of hide and seek, I would sometimes hide inside this tippy when Maisie wasn't looking, where she would spend the next couple of minutes, circling round the hut trying to find me, not realizing she could just go inside. Whether I played this game with Maisie that day, I'm not sure, but following down this exact same side trail, I turned to look behind me. Staring down the entryway, I then see a man walking 20 meters behind, having just taken this side trail. For some unknown reason, I had a strange, instant feeling about this man, even though I had only just noticed him. I can't remember or even describe the way this man was walking, but the way he did so felt suspicious to me. Listening to my instincts, or perhaps just my paranoia, I quickly latch my lead back onto Maisie and hurriedly make my way down the trail. A few minutes later, although I had reached back onto the main trail, the evening had already turned much darker. Again, turning to see if the man was behind me, I could still see him around the curve, only 10 meters away from me now. I did try to tell myself I was just being paranoid, and this man was most likely not following me, but my gut instinct still told me something was off. Thinking ahead, I pull out my phone to call my dad, as to make sure he was already in the car park waiting for me, but there was no answer. Because there was no answer, I just assumed he was probably still driving, and because he was still driving, I just hoped my dad was nearly on his way. By the time I make it back to the car park, it was basically pitch black by now, and there was just one single car in the parking area. But it wasn't my dad's, sitting down by a picnic bench to wait for him to come and get us. All I could do was hope he would be coming soon and that this strange man from the woods was not following me after all. Only a minute or two later, I could hear the footsteps of this very same man approaching through the darkness. Anxiously anticipating him pass by, I try to distract myself on my phone, or at least make myself seem less approachable. Thankfully enough, the man just walks completely by me. Entering the car park, the man then gets in his vehicle, the only car in the car park. But he doesn't drive away. He just stays there, sat inside his car with both the engine and headlights turned on. 20 minutes must have gone by, but my dad still wasn't here, and yet this very same stranger was. Trying to call and text my dad to say I was waiting for him, I was met with no answer. While I continued waiting, I tried to rationalize why this man hadn't decided to drive off. Whatever reasons I came up with, they were not very convincing for me. And for those whole 20 or however many more minutes, I sat outside those woods in complete darkness, hearing nothing but the hum of this stranger's engine among the silent night air. What made this situation even more anxiety-inducing was that my dog Maisie had been endlessly whining by my feet, scraping dirt away beneath the bench to make a surprisingly deep hole. Maisie was in general a very nervous dog and basically whined at everything, but perhaps she too felt as though something about this situation wasn't right. Thankfully, after what felt far longer than 20-so minutes, the strange man, already with his engine and headlights on, reverses from his parking spot, exits out of the car park and onto the main road, leaving me and Maisie in peace. Although we were now alone, basically stranded outside of a dark forest, I couldn't help but feel a huge sigh of relief come over me. My dad did eventually come and get us, 10 minutes after the man had finally decided to drive off. Do you want to know what my dad's excuse was as to why he was so late? He forgot he had to pick us up. I don't know if that man really was following me through the forest, and I definitely don't know why he just sat in his car for 20 minutes. But if I had to learn anything from that experience, it would be the following. 1. My dad can sometimes be a careless douche, and 2. Never hike through the forest alone late in the evening.
This happened a few years ago, and I've never told anyone about it. I don't know why I'm posting it here now, but it's been on my mind again, and I just need to get it out. At the time, I lived pretty far out in the country. Just me and my dog, no close neighbors, and it was usually really quiet. I liked it that way. It was usually really quiet. I liked it that way. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night to the motion sensor light going off outside. At first, I thought it was just an animal, maybe a deer or something. But when I looked out the window, I saw a man standing at the end of my driveway. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing my house. I don't know why, but I froze. I just stood there staring at him, and he didn't move at all. The light went off after a while, and everything went back to dark and quiet. I didn't sleep much after that. The next night, it happened again. The light came on, and there he was. Same spot, same stillness. Just standing there, staring at the house. By this point, I was starting to get really freaked out. I called the sheriff's department, and they sent someone to check it out. But by the time they got there, he was already gone. The deputy told me it was probably just some drunk guy or someone passing through, and that I shouldn't worry unless he started coming closer. That didn't make me feel better, but I tried to move on. This went on for about a week. Every night, like clockwork, I'd wake up and see him standing there at the end of the driveway. It was always the same. He never moved, never said anything. Just stood there, staring at my house. It got to the point where I started closing the blinds at night, but I still felt like I could feel him out there. And then, just like that, it stopped. I never saw him again after that week. No explanation, no reason. It just ended. I've never told anyone this before. It's probably not a big deal, but it's something that stuck with me. I just needed to write it down.
Right, so picture this, it's about 4 in the morning. One of those cold, damp London weekdays where the air feels heavy and clings to you. I'd fallen down a video game rabbit hole, surfaced hours later, and realized two things. One, it was obscenely late. And two, I'd completely forgotten to eat dinner. A quick, desperate scan of the kitchen confirmed the worst. Nothing. Damn it. My only hope was the 24-hour McDonald's down the road. It's maybe a 10-minute walk, mostly through quiet suburban streets that feel almost unnervingly still at that hour. Coat on, I headed out into the pre-dawn gloom. Habit took over, and I immediately stuck my earphones in. Scrolling through my phone to catch up on the messages and notifications I'd blissfully ignored for the past several hours. In hindsight, I know exactly how that looks. Headphones in, face lit by a phone screen, completely oblivious to the world at 4 a.m., prime target material, basically. I was about halfway there when I registered movement just behind me. I glanced back. There was a guy swallowed by an oversized hoodie, riding a bicycle. Except, it wasn't a normal bike. It was painfully obviously a child's pink bicycle. The tiny frame looked ridiculous underneath him. He wasn't going anywhere specific, just doing slow, wide loops on the empty street, always ending up slightly behind me. Now, I've lived in London for about 3 years. You see weird stuff? It's part of the background noise. My default programming kicked in. Head down, keep walking, don't make eye contact. He'll get bored. Standard operating procedure for navigating the city's low-level strangeness. But then he wasn't behind me anymore. He smoothly cycled up right alongside me, matching my pace. The ignore it strategy suddenly felt very thin. He was muttering something. It was clear he wanted my attention. Reluctantly, I pulled out one earbud, still walking, trying for casual indifference. My automatic defense mechanism fired off before I even properly heard him. I'm sorry, I don't have any change. That's when I made the mistake of actually looking at him. He wasn't asking for change. His eyes locked onto mine, and there was a hard, focused intensity there that immediately set off alarm bells. My gaze flickered down. His right hand was shoved deep into the front pocket of his hoodie, pushing the fabric outwards. Oh, it wasn't a slow dawning realization, more like a sudden plunge into ice water. The casual weirdness evaporated, replaced by cold, sharp-edged fear. That's when I properly registered his words, spoken low but clear. Give me your phone. My feet kept moving, seemingly on autopilot, but the rest of me felt frozen. My brain felt like it was buffering, trying to process the demand against the very real possibility of what was in that pocket. Is he bluffing? Is that a knife? Is this phone I literally just got and definitely can't afford to replace, worth getting stabbed over? The mental calculus was frantic and terrifying. We were still moving forward, side by side in this bizarre, terrifying mobile standoff. Me staring straight ahead, hyper-aware of him beside me, my mind racing, and then a sound. The distinct rumble of a car engine growing louder. Headlights swept across the end of the street, illuminating the junction just yards ahead. A brief moment of blinding light. I shot a look back at the guy on the tiny pink bike. The thought flashed, run, make a break for the car, for the light, but before the thought could even translate into action, he abruptly swerved. He pushed off hard on the tiny pedals, cycling rapidly away down the street, disappearing back into the shadows as quickly as he'd appeared. I stood there for a second, heart hammering against my ribs. Then the next thought hit me. I still have to walk home. Needless to say, the McDonald's craving vanished instantly. On the way back, the headphones stayed off and my phone stayed deep in my pocket, clutched in my hand. I also gave the quiet suburban streets a wide berth. Instead, I took the long way round, sticking to the main road. It's noisy, choked with fumes even at this hour, and the pavement is basically a narrow, neglected strip inches from speeding traffic. It felt horrible, but infinitely safer. The constant stream of headlights, the drone of engines, it was unpleasant, but it was presence. Company of a sort. Thankfully, the rest of the walk was uneventful. No more unexpected cyclists emerged from the dark. But yeah, guy on a tiny pink bike, 4 a.m., demanding my phone. Let's definitely not meet again. In this video, there are 4 creepy stories from Reddit based on real events. Stalkers, the supernatural, deception, and dark family secrets. People share what truly happened to them. Not for the faint-hearted. Age restriction, 16 plus. That's all for today. If you want more real stories from Reddit, make sure to subscribe. Write in the comments which story affected you the most. And if something similar has happened to you, feel free to share it. Thanks for watching until the end. See you in the next episode.